What happens when Hollywood's most notoriously straight-talking actor sits down with late-night television's most provocative host? You won't believe what unfolds when Mark Wahlberg faces off against Stephen Colbert in what began as a simple promotional appearance, but quickly spiraled into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night history. The tension was palpable from the moment Wahlberg walked onto the stage. What followed left audiences stunned and social media buzzing for days. Before diving into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you won't believe what happens when two of entertainment's biggest personalities clash in the most unexpected way. The episode began like any other, with Colbert's trademark smirk and polished opening monologue. The audience was primed for laughs, expecting light-hearted banter and easy questions. Wahlberg, dressed in his signature casual blazer and jeans, entered to enthusiastic applause, flashing that familiar Boston charm. The handshake between host and guest seemed cordial enough. But there was a glint in Colbert's eyes that hinted at something deeper. "Mark, thanks for being here," Colbert began, settling into his chair with calculated casualness. "You know, I've followed your career for years, from the early days with the Funky Bunch to your recent ventures in the restaurant business. Quite a journey from rapper to Oscar-nominated actor to entrepreneur." Wahlberg shifted slightly in his seat, his Boston accent thick. "Yeah, it's been a wild ride, Stephen. I'm grateful for every opportunity I've had. From the streets of Dorchester to Hollywood, it's all been about hard work and staying true to who I am." The first red flag came when Colbert leaned forward with that predatory smile he saves for the moments before a sharp question. "Speaking of staying true to who you are, Mark, I'm curious about your recent comments regarding your early morning workout routine. You've been vocal about waking up at 2:30 a.m., praying, working out for 2 hours, then having breakfast with your family. Some people find it inspiring. Others suggest it's a bit performative. What's your take?" The question caught Wahlberg off guard. His eyes tightened slightly. "Performative? I've been doing this for years, Stephen. It's not about showing off. It's about discipline, about setting an example for my kids. I don't see what's performative about taking care of your body and your spiritual life." Colbert's smile didn't fade, but there was steel beneath it. "I'm not questioning your routine, Mark. I'm questioning the need to broadcast it to the world. Didn't Jesus say something about praying in private? Matthew 6:6, if I recall correctly. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen." "Seems like your door's wide open for the cameras," the audience murmured uncomfortably. Wahlberg sat up straighter, his jaw tightening. "Look, Stephen, I share my routine because people ask about it. If it motivates someone, great. I'm not trying to be holier than thou. I'm just being honest about what works for me." "Honest," Colbert repeated, letting the word hang in the air like a challenge. "That's interesting. Honesty seems to be a big part of your public persona. You've been open about your troubled past, your time in prison, your transformation from street kid to family man. It's a compelling story, Mark. Almost too compelling." The temperature in the studio dropped. Wahlberg's hands, once resting casually on his legs, curled into loose fists. "Too compelling? What are you trying to say here, Stephen?" "I'm saying redemption stories sell, Mark. They sell movies, books, restaurant franchises. The question is, how much of Mark Wahlberg's redemption is genuine transformation, and how much is carefully crafted marketing?" The studio was dead silent. Wahlberg's face flushed red. His voice dropped to that dangerous Boston growl familiar to anyone from his old neighborhood. "You know what, Stephen? I've been nothing but respectful. Coming on your show, talking about my movie, giving your audience a good time. But if you want to sit here and question my faith, my character, whether I'm genuine about the changes I've made, then maybe we should just cut this short." Colbert leaned back, clearly enjoying the reaction. "Come on, Mark. Don't get sensitive. I'm just asking the questions people are thinking. You've built an empire on your redemption story. Your production company, your restaurants, your businesses, they all trade on the Mark Wahlberg brand of authentic tough guy who found God. It's worth millions, isn't it? You think I'm doing this for money? Wahlberg's voice rose, his accent thickening. You think I get up at 2:30 every morning, pray, work out, try to be a good father and husband for marketing purposes? Are you out of your mind? Colbert's eyes gleamed. I'm not saying you're doing it for money, Mark. I'm saying you're profiting from it. You've monetized your spiritual journey, your fitness, your family values. You've turned personal growth into a brand. That's fine, capitalism at its finest. But let's not pretend it's just about being a good example. Wahlberg stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His hands trembled slightly. Whether from anger or adrenaline, it wasn't clear. I've made mistakes. Big ones. I've hurt people. But I've worked every single day for the last 30 years to be a better man, to make amends, to contribute something positive. And if you want to twist that into some cynical marketing ploy, then you're exactly the kind of person who makes this business so toxic. The confrontation was at a boiling point. Everyone in the studio could feel it. Colbert, perhaps realizing he'd gone too far but unable to back down, pressed on. Mark, you're missing the point. I'm not attacking your personal journey. I'm questioning the public performance of it. When you post your workout videos, talk about your prayer life. Constantly reference your past. At what point does personal growth become public spectacle? But Wahlberg wasn't listening to the nuances anymore. The damage was done, and the fuse was lit. What happened next would shock everyone in the studio and create a moment replayed across social media for weeks. You know what, Stephen? Wahlberg's voice cut through the studio like a blade, his Boston accent thick with barely contained rage. I came here tonight to talk about my new movie, to have some laughs, maybe share a story or two. But instead, you want to psychoanalyze me like some two-bit shrink who thinks he's got it all figured out. You want to reduce everything I've worked for, everything I've built, to some kind of marketing scam. The audience froze, unsure whether to applaud, gasp, or simply sit in stunned silence. Colbert, however, seemed energized by the confrontation, his eyes bright with the thrill of having pushed his guest to the breaking point. Mark, I think you're overreacting, he said coolly. I'm simply pointing out the intersection between personal brand and authentic experience. It's a legitimate question in today's media landscape. Overreacting? Wahlberg stepped closer to Colbert's desk, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the host. You just accused me of faking my faith for profit. You just suggested that my morning prayers, my relationship with God, my attempts to be a better father and husband. His voice tightened. You just called all of that a performance. And you think I'm overreacting? The studio cameras caught every micro-expression, every tremor in Wahlberg's voice, every calculated smirk on Colbert's face. The host leaned back in his chair, his posture casual but defiant, only fueling the fire. I didn't say you were faking your faith, Mark. I said you were commodifying it. There's a difference. When you turn your spiritual journey into social media content, when you use your transformation story to sell restaurant franchises, when you leverage your redemption narrative to build a business empire, that's not about faith anymore. That's about profit. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Wahlberg's face went through a rapid storm of emotions. Shock, hurt, then something much more dangerous. His clenched hands moved to grip the edge of Colbert's desk, knuckles white with tension. You want to talk about profit, Stephen? Let's talk about your show. How you've built your entire career mocking people's beliefs, tearing down anyone who doesn't share your worldview, turning human decency into a punchline for your audience to laugh at. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This was no longer entertainment. This was a verbal bloodbath unfolding in real time, broadcast to millions. Colbert's smile faltered for just a moment, but his media training kicked in fast. Mark, I think you're conflating comedy with personal attack. Satire has always been about challenging power structures, questioning authority, examining the narratives we tell ourselves. If that makes some people uncomfortable, well, that's the point. Uncomfortable? Wahlberg's laugh was bitter and cold. You think this is about your comedy? This is about you sitting in your ivory tower, looking down at people like me, people who actually struggled, made mistakes, and worked to fix them, and turning our lives into your material. You've never been where I've been, Stephen. You've never had to fight for anything real. The personal sting of the attack cracked Colbert's professional armor. His jaw tightened. For the first time, he looked rattled. Mark, you don't know anything about my struggles, Colbert shot back. About what I've been through. You're making assumptions based on what? Wahlberg interrupted, his voice rising, making the studio audience flinch. Based on watching you for years, using your platform to mock people's faith, to ridicule anyone who doesn't fit into your narrow little worldview. Based on watching you turn human suffering into comedy gold, while you sit behind your desk in your expensive suit counting your money. The tension in the room was explosive. Colbert's producers were frantically gesturing off camera, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the clash unfold. The host himself seemed torn between professionalism and personal pride, his carefully constructed persona beginning to fracture. You know what, Mark? Maybe you're right. Maybe I am privileged. Maybe I haven't walked in your shoes. But at least I'm not selling my redemption story to the highest bidder while pretending it's about faith and family values. At least I'm honest about what I am. The words hit Wahlberg like a physical blow. His face twisted with pain and fury, a dangerous mix. Honest? Wahlberg's voice dropped, low and sharp. You hide behind comedy, behind sarcasm, behind your writers and producers, and your carefully scripted questions. You create personas to say the things you're too cowardly to say yourself. And you want to lecture me about honesty? At least I don't pretend to be something I'm not, Colbert snapped, his composure finally shattering. At least I don't wrap my ego in the flag of redemption and call it spiritual growth. At least I don't monetize my mistakes and call it ministry. The studio fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the hum of cameras and the breath of 200 people holding it. Wahlberg stood motionless, chest heaving, eyes locked on Colbert. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, but far more dangerous than his shouting moments earlier. You know what, Stephen? I've been in this business for 30 years. I've worked with the best and the worst. I've seen people at their highest and their lowest. But I've never encountered someone so fundamentally broken, so consumed by their own cynicism, that they'd attack a man's faith, his family, and his attempts to better himself just to get a reaction for their television show. The accusations seemed to hit Colbert harder than anything that came before. His face went pale, and for the first time, he was genuinely speechless. The confident host who had started this confrontation was gone, replaced by a man realizing he'd pushed too far. But Wahlberg wasn't finished. The dam had burst, and decades of frustration poured out like a flood that would define how this night would be remembered. You want to know what's really disgusting about this, Stephen? Wahlberg's voice was steady now, heavy with conviction. It's not just that you attacked my faith. It's not just that you questioned my motives. It's that you did it with that smug little smile on your face, like you were doing the world a favor by tearing down someone who's actually trying to make a difference. The studio was silent. Everyone knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. Colbert, still reeling, tried to recover. Mark, I think we're both getting a little heated here. Maybe we should— No. Wahlberg's interruption was sharp. You don't get to back down now. You started this. You wanted to psychoanalyze me on national television. You wanted to reduce my entire life to some kind of marketing strategy. So let's finish it. He stepped closer to the desk, his presence filling the frame as the cameras caught every detail. You know what I see when I look at you, Stephen? I see someone who's never had to fight for anything real. Someone who's never had to look in the mirror and hate what they see. Someone who's never had to get down on their knees and beg God for forgiveness because they've hurt people so badly they didn't know if they could ever make it right. Colbert's composure cracked. Mark, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know my story, my struggles. Your struggles? Wahlberg's laugh was harsh. You went to fancy schools. You got handed opportunities. You built your career on other people's pain and called it comedy. Where's the struggle in that, Stephen? Where's the character building in mocking other people's beliefs from behind a desk? Something in Colbert broke. His hands trembled. Whether from anger or humiliation, no one could tell. You know what, Mark? You're right, he finally said. I haven't been to prison. I haven't fought my way out of the streets. But I've also never assaulted anyone. I've never committed hate crimes. I've never built my public persona around apologizing for being a violent criminal. The words hit like a detonation. The audience gasped. People in the front row physically recoiled. Colbert had crossed a line no host should ever cross. Wahlberg's face flickered with shock, hurt, and then a strange calm. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but powerful. There it is, the real Stephen Colbert. Not the comedian, not the satirist, not the political commentator, just a mean-spirited little man who thinks he can destroy someone with their past because he's never had the courage to make real mistakes himself. The studio was so silent the hum of the air conditioning could be heard. Colbert looked like he instantly regretted it, but the damage was done. You know what's funny, Stephen? Wahlberg continued, his voice steady. I've spent 30 years haunted by what I did as a kid. 30 years trying to make amends, trying to be better, trying to help others avoid my mistakes. And you just tried to use that against me like it was a weapon. He straightened, his tone shifting from fury to something closer to pity. But here's what you don't get. Those mistakes, that pain, that guilt, they made me who I am. They taught me about forgiveness, redemption, the power of second chances, and every single day, I try to be worthy of the grace I've been given. Colbert tried to speak, but Wahlberg raised a hand and silenced him. What's your excuse, Stephen? What's your excuse for cruelty? For attacking someone's faith? For turning basic decency into a punchline? Because unlike me, you don't get to blame it on being a stupid, angry kid. You're a grown man who chose to be petty and vindictive on national television. The host's face crumpled, and for a moment, he looked like he might cry. His voice was barely a whisper. Mark, I didn't mean I went too far. I'm sorry. But Wahlberg was already stepping away. You know what, Stephen? I actually feel sorry for you. Because 30 years from now, when you look back on your life, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that you had the chance to have a real conversation with someone who's lived through something meaningful. And instead, you chose to be small, bitter, and cruel. He turned to the audience, his voice carrying through the studio. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here tonight to talk about my new movie, to share some laughs, maybe tell a few stories. Instead, I got a masterclass in how cynicism can rot a person's soul. This is what happens when bitterness and self-righteousness replace human decency. The crowd was transfixed, watching a man reclaim his dignity in real time. Wahlberg looked back at Colbert one final time. Disappointment and sadness etched across his face. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Stephen. I really do. Because whatever drove you to attack me tonight, that's not about me. That's about you. With that, he walked off the stage, leaving Colbert alone at his desk. The weight of what had just happened settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Cameras kept rolling, capturing his pale, stricken face. The visible realization that he might have just destroyed his career on live television. The audience sat in stunned silence. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a reckoning. The mask had been ripped away, and something ugly had been revealed. As Wahlberg's footsteps faded, the cameras lingered on Colbert, alone, staring down at his hands. The confrontation was over. The consequences were just beginning. And that's how one of Hollywood's most respected actors walked out on one of television's most powerful hosts, leaving behind a moment that would be dissected and remembered as the night late-night television changed forever.